And with that, we recognize a friend of the space, Sergej. Sergej Sumlenny, thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having invited me. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here, you guys. Thank you.
As you can see, we're still here. The troop is still there, Domen, Mace, and the likes. And the space still continues to go after, what is it now, 118, 119? I mean, sometimes I'm going to lose count. Nearly 4 months into it, and we're still here. And thank you very much for joining us again. It has been a pleasure last time. And as I understand, you yesterday had a very comprehensive session at the University Viadrina in Frankfurt Oder, so directly at the border between beautiful Poland and Germany, to talk about the topic of genocide. How did that go?
Oh, yeah, thank you. Indeed, I've been yesterday in the city of Frankfurt on the Oder, is a border city of Germany where you can walk to Poland, like from the center of the city over the bridge and enjoy the wonderful hospitality in Poland. Well, and yeah, it was an event organized by students of the International University of Viadrina in Frankfurt. And we were talking about the question if what is happening in Ukraine right now can be qualified as a genocide. And we regularly listen or hear that some events are a genocide, and in many cases, when someone calls something a genocide, it's been like perceived as a political exaggeration, like something just wants to say that something really bad is happening. But the genocide itself is a very clear legal term. There is a convention, a UN convention from the year 1951, on the prevention and prosecution of genocide. And it says very clear what is genocide, what is not genocide. And my idea is that, and I try to present it amid this session, that what is happening in Ukraine right now is 100% genocide in very strict legal terms, which are being said by the International Convention, because the convention says that the genocide or an attempt to destroy a nation is something what happens when someone tries to eliminate the whole or a part of ethnic, religious, or other group, and makes one of five steps. Like one off is enough. And this like one off is like deliberately killing of members of this group, or putting them in conditions which are very risky, or imposing them to very hard psychological harm, or removing children of this group to another group, or preventing this group from giving childbirth. And actually, everything what we see in Ukraine is exactly as this convention on the prevention of genocide says. Like Russians deliberately kill Ukrainians because they're Ukrainians. Russians deliberately target civil infrastructure, which what makes life in the big cities of Ukraine impossible. Russian deliberately hit hospitals and maternal hospitals, and Russian deliberately take Ukrainian kids from Ukraine and adopt them in Russia without even trying to seek for their parents or grandparents in Ukraine, according to official statements of Russian General Nezentsev 2 days ago. Russia has transferred 307,000 Ukrainian kids from Ukraine to Russia. So my idea was that what we're dealing with is clearly a genocide and should be treated like that. And answering your question, well, it was surprisingly well received, and I could imagine any sort of like controversies and arguing, etc. But it was amazing to see like 25, 30 people in the audience, mostly students of Viadrina University, who were actually sharing the same opinion and were very interested and very pro-Ukrainian. What was actually time of like really fresh air, considering a very spoiled German discussion on what is happening in Ukraine, where you have a lot of people who are actually like denying every criminal component of Russian actions in Ukraine, which is like very hard to witness. Yeah, so that's how it was. Thank you.
How
Hey,
did that
Sergej.
differ? Sorry, yes, please, Yehuda.
Yeah, sorry. Hey, Sergey, it's Yehuda again. Thanks for coming, by the way, on behalf of Walter Port and Marie Aid. We really appreciate you being here. Just a quick question. You made a great point about the politicization, oftentimes, of genocide. And at the beginning, before this kicked off, some of us with access to different information might have realized that this is where it's going. But we were obviously uncomfortable saying it off the bat because it hadn't happened yet. Now that it's pretty clear, I think is it fair to say, I mean, you talked about the Convention on Genocide. Um, the definitions of genocide have been expanded pretty much across the board over the last 20 years as well, to be a little more inclusive so that it makes it harder for aggressor states to weasel out of the accusation, right? Um, what what did you get any negative responses? You said it, by and large, it was good, but can you speak to any dissenting points of view and what reasons they would have given for not agreeing with you?
I haven't got like any negative responses yesterday. I mean that lecture, and as I told, like it was like really unexpected because normally you have like voices which deny what is happening. But yes, of course, like within the discussion in general in Germany, you have all these questions. Like some of them, they sound to be reasonable. For example, they say, okay, we have all the cases of the rape, but can you prove that this rape is being like sanctioned or allowed or prescribed from the commanders? Like maybe it's just like many, like hundreds of separate cases of personal misbehavior of certain soldiers. And that's why these people say it cannot be identified as a war crime en masse, like as a war crime, like committed by Russian Federation, but there are only like a chains, like hundreds or maybe thousands of separate single individual crimes. That's actually bullshit. Like
For
this
sure.
argument.
One of the things people do say, and I'd love you to address this because it comes up a lot, is they'll say, well, supporters of Ukraine, you yourself have said the Russians don't have good command and control. You yourselves have said the Russians aren't good at controlling their own troops. Isn't this rape just an example of bad behavior? Do you see where I'm going with that? I get very upset when I hear it because it's trying to, obviously it's an apologist approach,
Yeah, and
right?
you know, like it can only sound more or less interesting and fresh in maybe some drunk discussion in a bar, but from any serious perspective, it's really bullshit because we have in the international law, we have a very clear concept of effective command and effective control, and effective control is the concept which says if you give commands to the troops and you are their commander, it doesn't ask you like if your commands are being like fulfilled every time exactly as you wanted. It's not about like if your soldiers are good trained, etc. No, it's about are you the commander of these troops? Do they receive your orders and do they fulfill them like in normal situation? If the answer is yes, then you are responsible for what your troops are doing, even if they are not your troops. Like the question of effective command or effective control is only important when we're dealing with some wild military formations, like with militias. And in this case, the normal defense of the state is to say, this is not our army. These are independent militias. They are not the members of our armed forces, and we're not responsible for the shit they're doing. But on Balkan Wars, it was proved that if a state effectively controls them and gives them order, and they identify themselves with the military strategy of the state, then their crimes are the crimes of the state, which controls them, and not our independent crimes of militias. So it's not about individuals; it's about like the units which are not officially a part of the armed forces. So in this case, in the Russian-Ukrainian war, this question of effective control should not even be addressed, because the crimes are being committed by soldiers of Russian army during their service time in Russian army and amidst their aggressive actions committed as a member of Russian army. So the next question will be if the rape and the torture and the killings of civilians, if they are like individual, like thousands and hundreds of individual misbehaviors, or it is a strategy. And here the answer is we have no case, no single case of a Russian soldier being prosecuted for what they have done, right? So no single Russian soldier has been arrested or like prosecuted for rape or torture or killing civilians in Ukraine. So these crimes are effectively being accepted by Russian army. The number two is we have a lot of evidences that the cases are being committed while being tolerated, at least tolerated by the commanding officers. We have hundreds of tapped phone calls of Russian soldiers telling their dear ones, including wives and girlfriends, about what they're doing in Ukraine, and saying that they are doing that like in groups, like, and it is beyond any reasonable doubt that if a group of soldiers of acting army during the wartime and during the fighting mission, if they keep civilians, like tens of civilians, dozens of civilians, in a cellar, torturing them, raping them, killing them, that this is being done in their free time, because a soldier in the fighting zone doesn't have free time. He is a part of fighting group, or fighting unit, and what he's doing is well known to a commanding officer. So there is no reasonable doubt, and actually, like many genocide cases are being prosecuted under this principle: is this beyond reasonable doubt, or is it not beyond reasonable doubt? So when some people in Germany sometimes ask me, yeah, Sergey, but you don't have a written order from a commanding officer of Russian division to rape Ukrainian women. And I say, of course, no. And maybe we will never have it.
I
But
think you'll be surprised, Sergey, when this war is over, I think Ukrainians will be presenting a lot of signal intelligence information that actually were directing certain Chechen units, certain groups within the Russian military.
I can imagine that
Yeah.
something like this
Yeah.
will be found, maybe not
Mhm.
in direct wording, but with some like weird wording. Because like we already have, for example, the articles published at RIA Novosti's webpage. It's the biggest Russian state-owned news agency, propaganda agency. And they have published their story on the 3rd of April this year. They've published a story named "What Must Russia Do with Ukraine?" And it's written very clear in Russian, like black on white, that Russia must introduce repressions, censorship, and other bad things on Ukrainian population. They clearly say that political elites of Ukraine should be eliminated because they are not to be re-educated, and they say a lot of other nasty things, clearly saying they have plans of destruction of a nation and committing war crimes, like addressing with their repressions the civil population. So I will not be surprised if we will have, like, at least in some euphemistic ways, such orders. But it's not necessary to find it. It's not necessary for any legal process to find it, because we have the situation when the crimes have been committed massively in hundreds and thousands of times. We see that the whole units were involved in these crimes. We see that information about it was well known, and we see that these people were not like prosecuted. Quite the opposite. The military unit which committed crimes in Bucha in Ukraine had been promoted by Vladimir Putin in 2 or 3 weeks after that, and Putin has granted this military unit the rank of a guard unit. So it was like the one of the highest promotions one can give to a military unit. So this is a clear chain of tolerance, acceptance, and most probably like stimulation of the crimes. If you remember the meeting of Vladimir Putin with President Macron 2 weeks before the war has started, during the press conference, joint press conference of Putin and Macron in Kremlin, Vladimir Putin has suddenly quoted a Russian punk song with the words, like it or not, you'll have to tolerate it, my beauty. And this is actually a punk song about a rape, like being a song from the perspective of a male person who tells like a girl, like it or not, like I will have sex with you and you will have only to tolerate and to go through this. So if the superior commander of Russian army and President Vladimir Putin, 2 weeks before the war, makes a clear joke about the rape, and he clearly meant Ukraine, because he said like it is like for Ukraine to go through this and tolerate it, what will happen to it, like Ukraine it or not. And in 2 weeks, Russian army marched into Ukraine, and Russian units commit mass rape and torture and killings. And these units have been promoted by Vladimir Putin to the rank of the guard units. And everyone knows that they rape people, because Russian soldiers call their dear ones and say, "We rape girls here." And the wife says, "Okay, you may rape girls there, but please use condoms and don't tell me about it anymore." So it is obvious, and for any international criminal court, for any tribunal, this will be enough, because we have much less. We had much less clear cases where people were found guilty because of indirect information.
Orders.
And this information is very clear and points directly at Vladimir Putin, who has organized this mass rape.
So I want to sum it up for the audience, Sergej, for a second. So what we're saying is that not only do you not need to have actual written orders from General so and so to Colonel so and so to Major so and so to Captain so and so, the simple fact, the de facto reality that mass rape and murder has existed and occurred in so many places throughout the battle space is in and of itself demonstration of an order, correct?
Yes, absolutely. And like we have, even within the Russian rotten legal system, we have similar cases. I can remember a case of the 90s, as a Russian Spetsnaz group was acting in Chechnya, and they have stopped a car, and there were civilians there. They have asked the per radio the commanding officer what should they do, and he said that you don't have civilians, you have 200s. 200 is on Russian military slang a dead person, like killed in action. And it was not a clear order to kill the civilians, right? But after the civilians have been killed, the court has said, okay, just the war scene, you don't have civilians, you have 200s. Was a clear order to kill civilians. So we have a chain of evidences, of euphemistic evidences, of behavior, of evidences of how the commanding officers reacted on what has happened, that it was a system. And we have reports of witnesses of survivors of rape in Bucha and Irpin and Borodyanka, who said that they were kept, like 25 young women were kept in a basement and were regularly raped by Russian soldiers. And they said that Russian soldiers who were raping them, they told them, we will rape you that much, that intense, and that often, that you will never have any idea to have a sex with a man anymore, and therefore you will not be able to bear any Ukrainian children. And this is exactly, even this only case is already a fulfillment of the point 5 of the Article 2 of the Convention on Prevention of Genocide, because it says that if you attack a group of special nationality or ethnic heritage, and you want them to stop bringing birth to children through anything, like you may spread like anti-birth pills, or you may sterilize them, or you may do whatever you want. In this case, you may rape them with this purpose, to make them angry on sex, and to make them to believe that sex is something very ugly and disgusting, and never have any idea to have sex anymore in their life. This is already a fulfillment of these characteristics. So this is already a genocide, and because the soldiers have not been prosecuted by their commanding officers,
or
and
even disciplined,
because it had been done in a group, because it had been done repeatedly, it shows that it was a system. And if we go back to the past, then we will see that mass rape is a system of terror used by Russian armies since at least Chechen wars in 1994, 2001. Because they have used it in Chechnya, there were reports of Human Rights Watch on that kidnapping and rape on young girls in Chechnya was used as a terror tool against Chechen villages. We know that a network of prisons where Ukrainian women have been held in occupied Donbass and regularly raped, existed since 2014 up to now in Donbass. And we know that a chance to rape a Ukrainian woman was, in many cases, some sort of bonus provided by Russian commanding officers to mercenaries. So they got part of their payments in salaries and money, and part of their payments they got, or bonuses, in form of these like visits to the prisons, where they may sexually attack Ukrainian women. We know that United Nations has published last year a report on sexual crimes of Wagner mercenaries. Wagner mercenaries is actually a branch of Russian GRU in Central African Republic. And in this report, the experts say that there are a lot of information that Russian Wagner officers regularly rape a lot of women, male and young women, in order to terrorize the civil population. So this is a system which exists since like at least 20 years. And the lieutenants and captains and majors of Chechen wars, 1994, 2001, they're colonels and generals now. So they have brought all this experience with them, and they use it now in Ukraine. But this is also only about the rape story, because in genocide there are also stories of indiscriminately attacking civilians, destroying infrastructure, and this is also available in Ukraine, because Ukraine is currently maybe the best case of genocide for any lawyer, because the Russians violate any single point of this convention, and do it repeatedly and very openly.
Yeah, if you were to look at an actual definition, and I invite someone to put it in the nest, there's a link to the International Court of Justice I was at. Russia's actually fulfilled not one, but every single definition of genocide in Ukraine. I don't mean to laugh. I'm saying it's shocking. And if just one more point, we want to go back to the children for a second. If the Russians were to posit some crazy theory that just randomly a whole bunch of soldiers raped and murdered civilians, had no idea, we never sanctioned it. We did discipline them, but we didn't tell you because we don't have an obligation to. How can they walk away from their own leadership saying we have, in effect, kidnapped 300,000, probably 500,000 Ukrainian children and resettled them in Russia with no intent to ever return them to any of their family members? How could a defense lawyer in The Hague defend that position?
Well, I'm pretty sure that Russians will be happy to develop some weird strategies. We know that, for example, the Nazis on the tribunals, I mean, the tribunals in Nuremberg and the other ones, they also have developed the strategies. And strategies were that, okay, everyone did it, or we didn't know that it was bad, or it wasn't forbidden, or like we did it for the best cause, or we didn't have any choice, etc. So these strategies are like pretty diverse, but regarding the kidnapped children, they have confirmed already 307,000 children have been displaced from Ukraine to Russia. And we know cases when these children how you call children without parents,
Orphans.
orphans. Exactly. Thank you so much. Sorry, it's like late evening of a hot day in Berlin. Yeah, so these children were not orphans. They had at least their grandfathers, grandmothers, or maybe even one part of their family. And anyway, that should be first of all be transferred to Ukrainian state because they're Ukrainian citizens. So what we know is that Vladimir Putin has personally addressed Russian lawmakers and asked them to push and like produce the legislation in a very urgent tempo on adaptation of these children in Russia and providing them, because in Russia it's very hard to legally to adopt a child who is a foreign citizen. So they first proclaimed their children who they, for example, kidnapped in Mariupol to be nationals of DNR, of Donetsk People's Republic, and then they have signed a so-called treaty with Donetsk People's Republic on mutual adoption of children. So that is how they created the legal basis. Of course, it's not legal base because it's not a law. It's an insult for a law, but that is what they say is their legal basis for this case. And then they transfer children to Russia and say they're not Ukrainians, they are citizens of the Donetsk People Republic, and the Donetsk People Republic allows Russians to adopt them, and so that's be. But it's not that important what Russians would say, because Russians can also say that Crimea is Russia, and no international tribunal would accept this like anyhow or anyone. So we have clearly a ban through this convention on genocide to forcibly transfer children of one ethnic group to another ethnic group or to another nation in order to like erase their ethnical or national identity, and that is what's happening. So I don't believe one can find any legal reason that this can be reasonable. The only thing I could imagine would be like bringing these children for 1 2 weeks to some camp in Russia. This maybe could be protected by some legal argumentation that it was the only way to save them from suffering. Okay, suffering caused by Russian army, but anyway, but not adaptation itself, because adaptation is that turning point. If you adopt a child, you bring him or her to another cultural, linguistic, geographical, and other environments. And in early age, it is exactly shaping new identity and erasing the old one. And this is exactly what Nazis did with Polish children during the World War II, as Nazi Germany took hundreds of thousands of Polish kids who were looking more or less Irish, as Nazis said, and brought them to Germany in this program Lebensborn to make Nazis out of them. And that's exactly what Russia is doing. They want to, because Russia, and that is what Vladimir Putin said, and I think this will be also a part of the legal procedure, I mean, the tribunal, the statements of Vladimir Putin, as Vladimir Putin said, and his minister said, that the biggest Russian problem is depopulation, and that the ethnic Russian population is in decline. So they clearly want to bring from Ukraine people who they think can fit into the Slavonic Russian ethnotype, erase their identity, and with kids it works the best, and increase through this weird and racist procedure to increase the amount of white Russians in Russia, and that is what they also openly say. So I think the next tribunal
Sergej, Patrushev has been writing about this in the past and quoted Dugin, who came up with the idea.
Yeah, that's why I say we have a lot of evidences for the tribunal. The problem will be not to have enough evidences, but to make the tribunal short, fast, and effective, without bringing the third and the fifth and the 10th evidence for the same crime, because we have enough of these evidences.
And for the audience, let's just clarify: when you say white Russians, you're juxtaposing it towards the Buryat, the Asian looking, and the Russians of Central Asia, right? So just for the audience's sake.
Yeah, exactly. Because Russia is a Russian Federation is effectively a multinational, multi-ethnic state with a clear hierarchy of good citizens and bad citizens. Like if you are Asian looking person or with dark skin, dark hairs, you will be you will not get an apartment in Moscow for rent. You will not get a good job. Police can stop you regularly and ask for your documents. You will be maybe assaulted in the street, and so on and so on. So the regions which are mostly inhabited by non-ethnic Russian people, not ethnic Slavonic Russian people, but Russian citizens of Asian or Turkish heritage and ethnotype. They are mostly more poor than Moscow and Petersburg. Moscow and Petersburg are anyway the most important and rich areas. And they have some of them. They have overpopulation of youth because they are very poor, because they have no programs for education, because when children get out of school, they don't go to university, they marry, they get birth to children in the age of 18, 19. So they have pretty much young people who are poor, who have no education, who have no life chances for a good job, for a good career, etc. So what Russian army is doing now currently, they suck out children, teenagers out of these regions, and send them to Ukraine. If you see the losses of Russian army on ethnicity, you will see that conscripts from Buryatia, it's an Asian republic in Russia, they have up to 100 more killed in action per 100,000 of population compared to Moscow. The same is happening with other ethnic regions, like with Dagestan, with Kalmykia, with Bashkortostan, etc. So what Putin is doing now effectively in Ukraine is also erasing a possible leverage of the heads of these ethnic populated republics, a leverage against Moscow in a case of some separatist conflict. He just takes the youth out of these regions and burns it in Ukraine, making these regions more stable and more obedient. And at the same time, it also gives the ethnic Russians, for example, ethnic Russian liberals, this perfect way to say, oh, no, it's not what Russians are doing in Ukraine. We are a very good nation, peace-loving nation. Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Tchaikovsky, Rachmaninoff, all the best Russians are Russians. No, it's what is being done in Ukraine. It's all these bad Buryats, Chechens, Dagestani, and others are doing, but not Russians. No, we are clean. So this is a very interesting, second and third layers of this war, when Putin and Russian liberals try to solve their own problems, without actually doing anything what can be legal or legitimate.
Thank you for that. I think CJ has had his hand up for a bit, if you don't mind. CJ is one of our resident panelists, artillery officer and a ranger, not a power ranger, a real one. So go ahead, CJ.
Oh, no, thank you for the introduction, Yehuda. No, I've been loving the conversation so far. I guess I sort of have a more specific question about, as you were mentioning, sort of the Ukrainians that are being forcibly conscripted to fight for Russia, and what prosecution against them, or what kind of framework should be taken, because you're talking about quite in depth active control, which is something we know a lot about in the military, whether it be the laws of armed conflict or just the general rules for soldiering. But how should Ukraine and the larger, international community treat these soldiers that are forcibly conscripted by Russia and also maybe committing war crimes by extension?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. And I think we should divide it into two parts. First one is conscription of people from the occupied region is a war crime per se. Like if you, as a nation which occupies other territories, conscript people from these areas to your army, you're committing war crime. That is actually what Russia was doing in Crimea all the time. Now they do it just on a larger scale in Donetsk, Luhansk regions. They try to do it also in Kherson region, and they send these people to the front. That what makes the situation different. But starting from 2014, Russia did the same with the young males in Crimea. They were also conscripted to Russian army, and this is a war crime. The other question is what to do and how to deal with these persons who are being caught with the arms in their hands, like when they, for example, get captive, when Ukrainians take them as prisoners of war. And I think in this case, if they are members of Russian army, then the answer is very clear: they're prisoners of war. Because it's not about how people got to the army. Okay, maybe please correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding is that if someone is a member of military unit of Russian army and he's got captured as prisoner of war, he's prisoner of war. And the question how he got into this army is very secondary and not important for his status. That is actually what Russians ignore completely, trying to present foreign citizens who are legal members of Ukrainian army as mercenaries. They're not mercenaries. When they fight within Ukrainian army as soldiers of Ukrainian army, they're not mercenaries. They're soldiers, and they're prisoners of war. The second question is what happens when these men from let me say Donetsk region, when they got conscripted, not by the Russian army formally, but by some first army corps of DPR, and they carry insignia of DPR, which doesn't exist. I would say that they still can be treated as prisoners of war in order to say later that Ukraine doesn't recognize DPR, which is correct, and any army unit of DPR is staying under direct control of Russian army, and therefore they are being considered as a part of Russian army. I think that would be even more easy for international prosecution to follow the crimes. Of course, there are questions what to do with the mercenaries of Wagner group and what to do with some people who just form some sort of irregular units, how they should be identified. But effectively, to say what groups should be protected by the convention. I think that the crucial question is not to what unit they belong, but can they be identified as the fighters? Because if you can be identified as the fighter, that means if you are wearing some sort of uniform and you wear the weapon openly, then you already got a large scale of protection. Because the convention protects you not only against the like irregular formations, which can happen all the time. Like we had in World War II, a lot of irregular formations, like partisans, like guerrilla fighters. We have them all the time. It doesn't mean that these people can be executed on sight when got caught. The question is the perfidy. Like if they commit the acts of perfidy. And the act of perfidy is, for example, when they mask as civilians and carry weapons under their clothes in order to attack your unit. That is perfidy. Or if they use the symbols of International Red Cross or like some other protected emblems in order to get closer to your positions and to attack. That is perfidy. And that is what deprives you of the status of prisoner of war and the protection. But not the fact if you are like, if you're wearing the white, blue, red flag on your uniform, the Russian one, or the black, blue, red flag of the DPR, which is actually like a non-existing structure, which is a phantom created by Russia. The question is if you are wearing something which can identify you as a fighter, and therefore you don't act perfectly. Yeah, that's the most essential question. All others like are secondary from my point of view.
No, thank you so much for that. As an American military person, I know it's something that America has gotten wrong or missed the mark in terms of, treating people as POWs or enemy combatants or civilians. And so, it's just so important that, we've seen for the majority of the time, Ukraine's done an excellent job providing the necessary protections under the Geneva Convention and everything else. So thank you for speaking to that distinction.
Yeah, well, just to be very short, like I think that for Ukrainians now, it doesn't make any sense for them to say, okay, we deal or we treat these people this way and these people this way. I think for Ukrainians, it's much better now to provide every person the same level of protection in order to avoid any speculations on what they're doing probably wrong, because they will not win this war by treating the DPR fighters badly, or how you call them, like mercenaries or bandits or terrorists, you choose, or conscripts, forcibly conscripts. They win this war by other means, and after the war, you can decide like what to do with this person and what type of criminal charges you should provide them. Because like even like in the U.S., you remember all these legal discussions, like what kind of treatment can be identified as torture, what kind is not, like is waterboarding a torture or not, if it's done under medical supervision, etc., etc., etc. So for me, sometimes it's really very scholastic and like way away from the ideas of the convention, because convention had been developed like 120 years ago and concerns with quite other wars, but the sense of this convention should remain the same. So now, like for Ukrainians, it's actually not important to distinguish between these two groups of soldiers or fighters. It is important for them to say we can provide proofs that all the actions are being designed and ordered from one center, and that center is in Kremlin. And that will be very important thing, and not that like, okay, like these guys may get 2 meals a day and this may get only one.
All right. Thank you so much, Sergej. I'm going to take just lead of order of hands. Finance, Maciej, Wendy, Raver. I don't know if that's the temporal order, but that's the order on my screen. So, Finance.
Great. Thank you very much, Sergej. Appreciate your perspective on the situation with the genocide going on the ground. given that the history is that Russia's been doing, this is the order of war since the Russian Empire. I mean, all the way back to the days I have the terrible history was my degree in undergrad before I became a business and finance person. I'm curious your thoughts on what's the sad truth is a lot of times in war in war and genocide, people just aren't persecuted. What is the most productive way, do you think, for Ukrainian society, since I am dour on my predictions for Russians as a society to come clean on their past crimes the way that Germans did after World War II? What is the best way for the Ukrainian society, besides fighting, which they're doing now, but longer term, with a lot of people having been through a lot of trauma, to work through these issues that is a societal trauma that we're seeing?
Yeah. Okay. It's. Thank you. And you've asked actually like a lot of questions in this question. I'll try to answer them more or less how I can do it. First, I think to prosecute the war criminals, there are only two ways for Ukraine. The one way is to win to that extent that Russia collapses, and then there will be no Russian state which would be ready to protect its own war criminals. And many Russian states will compete against each other for being recognized by the West and get some support by the West. And one of the part of this competition will be for sure the sending war criminals to the Hague, right? Because if you are not Russia anymore, but like Saint Petersburg Republic, like Ingria, or like some Urals Republic, etc., or Buryatia, or federal state of Siberia, you don't have any interest to keep these people at home if you can get some fast track in the EU candidacy, or more loans from International Monetary Fund or something like that. If you make reform on judiciary, reform of taxation, reform of that and that and that, and also do your housework and arrest and send to the Hague all the war criminals of Vladimir Putin's war, which is not your war anymore, right? So this is one case. This is exactly what had been done in Yugoslavia, because the states of former Yugoslavia, they were not that much interest to have all these people to keep them home and to confront the EU and the world community. Okay, in some cases they were not very willing to send people to the Hague, but more or less they have delivered them. Another one idea is what happens when we'll have a stalemate. When Ukraine wins, in the sense it preserves its identity and territory, but Russia is not defeated completely and Russia doesn't collapse. In this case, I already read since months the ideas of Ukrainians who say, we need to have our own Mossad, we need to have our own units of SBU, who will just hunt Russian war criminals like the Mossad did with kidnapping and arresting, bringing to Jerusalem of Eichmann, and killing some members of terrorist groups, blowing them into the air, to make justice. And Ukrainians have already started to collect evidences and to publish names of the people who have been personally involved in these crimes. You have the whole list of the rapists from Bucha with all the names, where they live, with addresses, with the photos, with their background, who are their relatives, where they live, what school they graduated from, etc. We also have some private initiatives of Ukrainian private businessmen who already promised head bonuses for these people got killed. Like, I'm not sure how you, if you want to get that bonus, how would you prove that you were the person who killed that guy, and how will you prove that the guy got killed? But at least you read this, that these initiatives exist. If this will be the functioning system, I don't know, because I think what we read now is a lot of like hot air, because people are really angry and they think how should they act. What will happen in reality, I don't know. Yeah.
Well,
Right.
whilst we do not happen, but whilst we do not know what will happen, we can only hope that friends of Ukraine and Ukraine itself will not give up until every single soul has been found out and sufficient amount of retribution has been paid. May we move to I Like Wendy before we go to our dear friend Maciej?
Yes, we may. I like Wendy.
Thank you, Axel. This is really interesting for so many reasons. Thank you for this wonderful space where so much learning happens. It brings...
What happened?
Too much
what
learning.
happens when you try to go in front of me.
Okay, Maciej, go ahead. I'll try to get I Like Wendy back.
Sorry, I like Wendy. I actually like you. So, Sergej, thanks a lot for joining us again. It's really invaluable time with you. I was interested to hear that you didn't receive pushback on your lecture. And do you think that's because, well, the basic reality of genocide happening in Ukraine is accepted in the West? But what we have, I think, especially in political elites, problem with accepting is that, or actually understanding, I don't know if you agree with me, that this is not a mistake or something that happens because war is chaos and people's instinct let loose and stuff like that, but actually the genocide as a political goal actually explains much better what Russia is doing in Ukraine than saying it's about territory or it's about economic influence or it's about NATO. And so do you feel like there is a chance that people will actually understand that although the goals shifted, they try to take Kiev, they try to basically dethrone Zelensky, now they shifted to the east, what remains is this narrative that says that Ukrainians are not a nation, they don't deserve to be a nation, and sovereign nation certainly, it's something that was concocted by the West, and those who cannot accept that have to be dealt with, because I think they're saying this all the time. So do you think the West should shift from seeing it as a war that has political, geopolitical goals to a war that has actually, well, genocidal goals?
Yeah, I think it's, in my case, it was way more simple. I think the audience was very special. It was like a very young audience of students who are very into the news and who have a lot of contacts in Ukraine, because this university, the Adrina, is a university with strong roots in Eastern Europe. So they mostly knew many things, and it was not like a surprise for them, or at least they were not all this old generation of pseudo pacifism, like pacifist Germans who were raised by decades of the rhetoric of how they should accept the interests of the Soviet Union in order to preserve peace in Europe. So I think the audience was very special. But I think that we indeed have a strong, not strong enough, but strong change in German public opinion when many topics which were absolutely unacceptable, like a year ago, have become at least the topics you may discuss openly. And of course, you will have earn your criticism, and you will be called like as a crazy person and warmongering. But you will also have supporters who will say, "Oh yeah, you're right," effectively. And these topics are, for example, should we treat Russia as an enemy state? Like this wasn't impossible to say like a year ago, that Russia should be treated by us as an enemy state. Or should we be prepared for military confrontation with Russia? Like, it was a no-go area 1 year ago. Or is it okay to support Ukraine with weapons in its war against Russia? Because that is actually a consensus in German politicum that we must support Ukraine with weapons. Of course, we had all these problems with delivery of heavy weapons, but these problems are mostly of personal character of some persons in German government. But the whole politicum is more or less unite with the understanding that it is good and legal and legitimate and legit and serving the right cause to provide Ukrainian army with weapons which will be used, I repeat, to kill Russian soldiers. And 1 year ago, if you just mentioned the idea that someone can kill a Russian soldier with a German weapon, you will provoke like a nuclear blast in the room. It was absolutely unthinkable. So now it is not only thinkable, it is possible. And it's also positively connotated by many serious politicians. So I think we indeed have a serious shift in the public perception, but this shift is not fast enough. Germans are perfect in developing very effective and right solutions to the problems which have been obsolete 5 years ago. And I'm afraid that is
You are
exactly
far
what
too
we
gracious,
experience.
my friend.
Oh,
You are
excuse me?
far too gracious. You are far too
Oh,
gracious,
so
my
not
friend.
5, but like 10 years. Okay. Yeah, maybe. Anyway, the changes take place, the shifts take place, but are they fast enough and respectively do they bring something? Because when I need to be saved while I'm drawing, it will not help me that people will organize a marvelous saving operation in 1 year, because I need to be saved now. Yeah, and I'm afraid we are currently still in Germany in this situation when we are preparing a marvelous saving operation for the next year.
Thank you, Sergey. I like Wendy. You got cut off at learning happens.
Thank you, Doman. I'll be concise and just make two comments with response to the excellent speaker we're lucky to have on the Walter Report here today. Sergej, thank you. Is it Sergej or Sergey?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's Sergey. Yeah,
Sergey, thank you for taking the time to speak today.
It's actually Sergej. Yes, Sergej.
No, it's not Sergey. I'm not Ukrainian. So when I speak Ukrainian, when I write in Ukrainian, I of course use my Ukrainian way of writing my name. It's Sergey in that case. But no, like although I speak Ukrainian and I spent like 6 years in Ukraine, and I try to do all what I can to help Ukraine in their fight against Russia and for Europe. No, I'm not Ukrainian. I'm a Russian-born person. I was born in Central Russia. I spent over 20 years of my life in Russian Federation. That is also the reason why I know Russia good and why I have absolutely no illusions about what is Russian object and how they will go to reach this object. So it's Sergey, and but when we will talk next time Ukrainian, I will be happy to be called Sergey. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sergey. I would just say, first of all, one of the examples you gave regarding one of the victims being told, now you can't have Ukrainian children, would be an example, it's fair to say, of a breach in point D of Article 2 of the Convention, which I believe is the denial of reproductive rights to, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group.
I would say absolutely. It is not only D. I think it is also B. If I'm not mistaken, the B is like causing unbearable psychological suffering. So it is a clear case, yeah, and that is the situation. We have a very clear, well documented case uh, with many crimes committed in different regions, but as a part of a whole system. And effectively, the only question is how fast we will be able to bring all the criminals or the main criminals to an international criminal court, to international tribunal. Because in this case, it is not about the lack of evidences. You have enough evidences. It is only about how can we organize the tribunal. And because for organization of the tribunal, we need to have these people. We need to have Vladimir Putin, Sergej Shoigu, like Patrushev, Lavrov, and others. We need to have them arrested. Yeah, and you cannot arrest Vladimir Putin now. So you need to have like something to happen before, and something to happen before is a military defeat of Russian Federation and occupation of Russian Federation, effectively. So that is the only problem which stays between the current understanding of the fact that we're dealing with well-planned genocide, and between the final case of the International Tribunal, when the judge will say, okay, it's genocide, case closed.
Yes, that's really interesting. You cited earlier the blaming of ethnic soldiers such as those from Dagestan. This, to me, would bear similarity to the myth that grew up after World War II, that the Frontoviki did not commit rape during World War II, and instead that this was solely perpetrated by rear echelon soldiers, when in fact we know from primary source evidence that the so-called Frontoviki did commit war crimes on a mass scale, and that this was systemic policy. Now, Yehuda said earlier something very interesting about how documentation will be released after the war by the Ukrainian side. We do have the same situation from the Second World War. We have the comments of Marshal Vasilevsky, who, when asked about the mass rapes of the Soviet army during 1945, he said, "I don't give a fuck. It's time for our soldiers to issue their own justice." And this mentality, sorry, apologies if that broke the if that broke the too early
fine.
rule.
No, that's fine. We could go far further out on this topic.
Thank you, Axel. The mentality here and the policy is linear. It doesn't take a historian to see that this behavior existed in the past, and it was part of military behavior in the past, and it is still present today. And I was just wondering, Sergej, if you could if you could possibly give your opinion that this was the consensus of the conference you went to, that there is genocide happening, and it is systemic, and it is the policy of the Russian Federation today.
Yes, thank you. And first, I need to agree with you. Indeed, it is, and it was, and it is Russian escape strategy to deny the crimes committed by Russians or by those who have been called heroes. You can remember the criminal case of Vasily Kononov in the Baltic countries. I think it was in Latvia. The guy who was a commanding officer of a Russian military squad. They have entered a village in the year, I believe, 1944, where before the local guerrilla fighters have killed some of Soviet soldiers, and they have decided to take the punitive action and to punish the peasants who lived in this village. So they have collected all them together, and one of the women they have caught was pregnant in the 8th or 9th month, so clearly visibly pregnant. They have killed them all and burned their corpses. And then disappeared, just because they wanted to punish the locals for the death of their comrades. Even without of course it was already a crime, but to make it even worse, they couldn't even prove that these prisons had any connection to the group of local guerrillas who killed the Soviets. So they just killed some random 10 peasants, including one pregnant woman, and disappeared. And in the early 2000s, I think it was Latvian prosecutor office who have started the case against Kononov, proved him guilty, and sentenced him to some years of prison. And it was an outrage in Russian media because he was like a war hero. How can war hero kill someone? And if he killed, there was a reason, and there were, of course, all the bad Nazis, etc. So it was like a normal Soviet or Russian defensive strategy. The crime didn't happen. If it happened, it were not we. If it were we, then we did it for a right course, and we can repeat. That is their normal the chain of their argumentation. So in this case, I'm sure that will be the same. They will say it was not Russian, it weren't Russians, it were all the Chechens and Dagestani and Buryats. And then we'll say it's not Russian population, it was only Putin, and we were all against the war. It's like the Germans used to say it was all Hitler, and my own family was in the resistance. We were all against the Nazis, and we were hiding Jews. And they will say it was the war of Vladimir Putin. And then they will say it was not that bad, and Ukrainians did it too. So the same strategy as, for example, in Germany, the modern neo-Nazis used when they say, yes, of course, the Nazi Wehrmacht did bad things, but look at the Americans and Britons, they have bombed Dresden, and they have done that, and effectively we were also victims. So actually there is nothing new. All these defensive strategies and denial strategies are the same in every dictatorial regime. If you look at the defensive strategies of Serbs, they're just not that well known because the war was pretty local, but they're actually the same. They say we were victims. They say the Albanians did that things which were way worse, and we are all the bad guys because the Americans wanted us to be bad guys, etc., etc. So nothing new is here that will happen in Russia too, but that shouldn't stop the tribunal.
Thank you, Sergej. I'm happy to drop down and make way for another speaker.
Sorry. And your question was if there was a consensus on the conference in the Adrina. Yes, it was consensus that it was a planned genocide and that the genocide takes place and took place. Yeah, sorry for not having answered this. No, sorry.
Can I follow up on this? Would you think that if you were to hold this speech and present the case, just like you did yesterday and what we discussed now, if you were to present this on a traveling panel, so to say, across both German universities and various other places, that the same kind of consensus would be reached across different segments of the population?
No, not at all. I think in most cases there will be some skepticism will be presented, and in some cases there will be very negative reaction. So I took part in many discussions on similar topics in Germany, and in most cases you have at least 2-3 persons in the public who are completely in denial, who say that it's all a lie, that nothing happens, and that the Russians had been provoked, and the NATO had lied to Russians, and the West said we will not expand, and we have expanded, and Russia has vital interests, and all the bullshit just like from the mouth of Lavrov. Yeah, like some
all the
very,
narratives. All
yes,
the narratives.
some very polite listeners of Russia Today news channels.
So actually, before we go to our three next speakers, what we have to make sure is that you and some of us go on a traveling show in Germany across many, many locations to make sure that people actually hear what the facts are.
Well, I would be happy to do this, but I have until now I have no such plans. I need to say, like, if you invite me, I would do it gladly.
We should talk about this. I think there's an idea there. I think we have Raver, then Verlaine, and then Nina.
Hello, everyone. Hey, Sergej. I love listening in. I have a real quick question, and I'll do a little expose on it as I ask it. Are you familiar with the trial of General Yamashita for command responsibility after the Battle of Manila? He was hung for failing to maintain control of his troops, even though he ordered Manila to be turned into an open city, because he effectively did not stop his troops from turning the city into a battlefield. He went to the gallows for it. So the idea that you would need or even need to imply that there was an order to do something doesn't stand up to the bright line from the Yamashita trial, where simply failing to act and exercise authority can get you sent to the gallows.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's exactly. Yeah, it's a great example. Thank you for mentioning it. Because exactly, yeah, it's even not about like giving the order or tolerating something. It's even about like not being able to control your own troops, because you are, as a general, as a commanding officer, you're responsible for what your men are doing. And that is actually like the main idea of the military, that you have the command chain. And if you don't fulfill your duties, and your duties, if you go like let me put it that way, if you go into the war, okay, first, if you go into the war currently under the current international law, it is already war crime. Like the moment the Russian generals gave an order to their troops, like following the order of the supreme commander, to cross the border, they have already committed war crime, because there is not such a thing in the international law as use ad bellum. Like use ad bellum, the right for a war, is a concept developed in the early Middle Ages and later developed like by many scholars as the right of a sovereign to start a war. Like the sovereign, the king normally, like, or the prince or the count, he or she is a person who decides if his army goes to war, and he has a right for a war. And the first there were, of course, like rules of war developed, like the first rules of war. The concept of that had been developed even by the middle age like scholars like Thoma Aquinius, like who said, okay, this is legal and this is not legal. Then there were like some chivalry codex, etc. That's all like the first conventions. Then we had like the Hague Convention of the warfare, etc. But in 1920, if I'm not mistaken, the Bryan-Kellogg Pact set the first limits to the use of military force and limited the use ad bellum, the right for a war. They said that even within the League of Nations, they said, okay, you may start the war, but before you do it, you need to go certain steps. You need to call for the compromise. You need to protest. You need to say, if you do that, then yeah, I do that. You cannot just jump into the war. And Bryan-Kellogg Pact said that no, like just like any start of the war should be treated as a breach of international law. And the end of this concept has happened in like with the creation of United Nations. When we say there is no right for the war, use ad bellum. There is only right in the war, which says what should you do and what you should not do when the war is already going, but you may not start a war. The only thing you're allowed to is to provide self-defense when you are already attacked. Self-defense individually or collective defense, but you may not go into war. You may only defend yourself, and there is no such thing as a preventive war. What Russia did, they said that they attack Ukraine in order to denazify it. And then they said, no, it was like a preventive war, because if we hadn't done this, Ukrainians would have attacked us. It is all the breach of international law. It's all already an international crime, and the generals are already responsible for fulfilling these illegal orders. The moment they ordered their soldiers to do, they have committed crime. And then they committed additional crimes like bombardment of civil cities, like killing of civilians who evacuate, like bombarding of the hospitals, which have been clearly marked, tolerating rape or even ordering rape, and. And what you have mentioned with the Manila massacre, yes, if you go into the war, you take a special responsibility on you, and you know that bad things happen on war, and your goal as a commanding officer is to prevent them. And if you cannot, you better don't go into the war. It's like the same, you start your car, your engine car, you drive, but you know you cannot control this car because you're drunk, for example, or because, I know idea, you don't have driving license, or because road conditions are slippery, and then you crash into like another car and you kill people. You cannot say, "Oh, it wasn't my intention. Actually, my car was not steered well because the road was slippery, and I didn't want to kill people. It was the slippery road which killed them." No, it was you, because you couldn't control the car, but you still decided to drive. So that is the same, actually. And thank you for bringing this marvelous example. Yes, no order is needed even in this case, when you can like say you could imagine that this will happen, and you couldn't stop it. Yeah, thank you.
All right, Verlaine.
Yeah, thank you, Axel. Thank you, Sergey, for joining us today. It's always insightful, and it's a pleasure having you on the panel. I was wondering if you heard that the Attorney General Mary Garland has come to Ukraine today. It's his unannounced visit. He actually met the head Ukrainian prosecutor general, Irina Venediktova, and he announced the launch of a war crimes accountability team to centralize and strengthen the Justice Department's ongoing work to hold accountable those who have committed war crimes and other atrocities in Ukraine. It's one of many efforts that America right now is doing to hold Russia accountable. How do you think, from your perspective, how big of a difference it will make in the long run?
Yeah, I think like it's very good that international teams are investigating, and we know that in Bucha, international teams, also German criminal experts, collect evidences since many weeks, like over a month, if I'm not mistaken. Of course, like it is the only way to do it, because first, Ukraine has not enough people who do this, who can do this. Second, Ukraine simply doesn't have experience in dealing with these crimes, and international community has people who spend their whole life in collecting evidences in similar cases, like Balkan Wars, Bosnia, Central Africa, Congo, you name it. So these people know how to collect evidences, how to catalogize them, where to search, how to do the service, etc., etc. And after all, I think it is very important for Ukraine, for credibility, to have international experts who collect these things. Because, like, I personally, I trust Ukrainian prosecutors who do their job, but I'm absolutely sure there will be hundreds of voices crying, "Oh no, no, no! These evidences are not good enough because Ukrainians have collected them, and we don't trust Ukrainians because Ukrainians just collected whatever they wanted." So it's important that international teams are doing their job. So this argument of pro-Russian deniers will not be valid anymore. Of course, they will say, okay, it was all the people from the NATO countries, very bad, nasty people, Russia haters. But okay, they will always object. But for the most people, like from Germany, for example, from France, from the US, there will be no doubt if the criminal experts, the forensic experts who collected the evidences were from many countries, independent countries, and they all came to this conclusion that it happened that and that and that. It will be a very strong argument. Yeah, I think it's really the only way how we can deal with this level of crime. Yeah, thank you. And yeah, one more thing. I was expecting that this space will last only 1 hour. Now it's already like 1 hour 20 minutes. I have another meeting in 8 minutes, so I think I will have to go away like pretty soon. I'm very sorry
We'll
for
be
that.
quick. We'll do a staccato round. I'm sure, Nina, we have 2 questions which Dorman has, and Nina has a question. So let's race through them, stack and rack.
Me?
Nina?
Yes,
Shoot.
thank you. Yes, I am awake. Thank you. I have a question concerning exactly this topic. How much have we seen the UN working for this thing? Because I don't see in almost any media, like, well, some media, something, but very little. And I just think that isn't this exactly something that the UN should be doing something about this? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I also don't know much about what is the UN doing on this case. I'm afraid that one of the reasons for that is that Ukrainians don't trust the UN very much because of the role of Russia in the UN. And, like in Syria, for example, as far as I know, there were at least the rumors made the Syrian NGOs who helped the victims of Russian airstrikes. They said, never tell the UN where you go, because this information will be leaked to Russians very soon, and Russians will bomb you while you're working on the place. I don't know if it is true, but that is what I heard very often from the people who work in Syria. They said that they believed that Russians could use any information available to the United Nations to use this information for their strikes. So I think that Ukrainians could expect something like that from the UN, and prefer therefore the forensic teams from certain nations like Germany, the US, the UK, etc., and not from the UN, because of Russian sources in the UN. I can imagine that. I don't say it's the 100% true, but that is what I can imagine.
Thank you, Sergej. This explains a lot, because we have seen how Russia has been behaving in the UN. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sergej. I hope we get to have you again back again and again, because it's always the most fascinating and excellent conversations with you. So, quick question here. Ukraine recently suggested that Kherson residents leave for third countries through Crimea. How much are these lessons from previous Russian retreats, especially from the northwest of Kiev, as well as other occupied territories, where there's a constant level of genocide while Russians are occupying a territory that seems to then spike up additionally during a retreat?
I have not understood your question very good. Do you mean that
when Russians previously retreated from various territories, the level of violence spiked up immediately prior to the retreat? Ukraine has, over the last few days, suggested residents of Kherson removed themselves from the area through Crimea into third countries. How much is that, do you reckon, driven by that previous experience of Russian retreats being particularly violent on the civilian population?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, I got it. Like, I think there are like several reasons for that. I think one of the reasons is that Ukrainians can imagine they will prepare like taking over of Kherson, because the Ukrainian troops are now fighting like in a distance of up to 10 kilometers from Kherson, which is pretty the city outskirts. And I think that Ukrainians imagine that they can start an offensive on Kherson and taking Kherson like within the next like maybe a couple of weeks. So the last thing that Ukrainians want to face there are the human shields which Russians can make out of Ukrainian residents. Because like the population of Kherson has demonstrated its strong resilience and resistance to Russians, and of course Russians don't treat them as someone who are friendly. And I can imagine that Russians could forcibly put these civilians in front of their troops or very close to their strategic objects like ammunition depots or like some commanding units, etc., commanding posts, etc., in order to prevent Ukrainian strikes. So I think for Ukrainians it is very important to have as few Ukrainian civilians in Kherson as possible before they attack the city, because they imagine that the attack itself can lead to a lot of distraction and a lot of fighting. So I don't think that the only reason that when Russians will before they withdraw, they kill civilians. That happened, you're right, every time. They don't only kill civilians or persons or prisoners. They destroy infrastructure. They kill animals. Like when Russians pulled out of Kharkiv Oblast, in one of the farms, they have just machine gunned some hundreds of cows. Like, just imagine how sick should be a commanding officer to order to collect like hundreds of cows into one pit and machine gun them before leaving. So yeah, Russians do these things. And of course, it's important to save the people. So I think that overall, it points out that Ukrainians are thinking of a very high chance of regaining control over Kherson. And I don't see anything which could, in a longer perspective, stop them from this. So I think that within the next weeks, we can see Kherson in Ukrainian hands once again. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Sergej. I know you have to run.
I'm so happy to be your guest, and so happy and delighted to have all your wonderful questions, which always bring like new focus and new like light to the discussion. Because like when you deal with some problematic, you look from one perspective, and sometimes you need a question from another person to think, oh wow, from this perspective I haven't addressed this problem anymore, but it makes much more sense now after I have like thought about it from this perspective. So thank you very much, it was amazing, and I wish you all a great day, and thank you so much. It was really fantastic to be your guest, and I hope to meet you all once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergej.
Thank you very much, Sergej.
Thank you.